Maros. Everyone who's learned the basics of Taras HaMashpacha nowadays discovers that a big portion of being Mekayim, these halachas, revolves around Maros. Meaning that the norm is, standard is, that almost every month in which a woman is trying to be matar herself, of course it could also happen on other occasions as well. So what ends up happening is she ends up coming across maros, in other words, possible stains. Well, they are stains, but possible blood stains. Most of them are on the spectrum somewhere between brown and red, which can include pink or orange, etc. And then either the husband or the wife bring the mara or leave the mara for the Rav to look at or for the Rav's Talmidim to look at, and they take a look and then they give their decision. It's tar, it's tameh. As time goes on, you might start picking up that this Rav, he's machmer. That Rav is mekel. Sometimes you'll even speak to a Rav and the Rav says, I can't be mekel, I can't be matar in this case, but I'll give you a tip. Go down the block, go to the other Rav. He'll be able to say that it's tar. Don't tell him I sent you, or tell him I sent you. Someone who wants to advance his knowledge on the subject, he wants to pasken himself perhaps. So what do they discover? So they know that they have to do what's called shimush with the Rabbanim that pasken in this area. And these Rabbanim are said to have some kind of mesorah in this area. And then as time goes on, one starts realizing that there are apparently different mesorahs among the different Rabbanim. And if one gave the time to it, one could actually try to trace how the mesorahs, where each mesorah began and how it spread from person to person, generation to generation. You can map out who belongs to which mesorahs, right? So certain Rav, he immigrated, let's say, to the United States or to Eretz Yisrael or wherever the country may be, immigrated from this place in Europe however many years ago, and he had tens or hundreds of Talmidim, and that established one derech of psak. And there's another Rav who immigrated from somewhere else, and his derech is different. And you have Talmidim that didn't just stick to one Rav, they made their rounds, they went from Rav to Rav, they picked up information from everyone. So what we described earlier about just even the average person noticing at some point that one Rav is machmer, one Rav is mekel, that corresponds to what the more advanced student identifies as this mesorah versus that mesorah. Right? So you have one Rav and his Talmidim, they have a mesorah to be mekel to an extreme, and then there are some, or at least there used to be some, who are machmer, you could say, to an extreme, and then you have those who are somewhere in the middle. That would be the general impression one would get based on a more popular sense of how this area works. So what I would like to discuss is to actually get into tackling this very subject, which includes really a number of general points. Number one, the question of bringing maros to the Rav, the history of bringing maros to the Rav. Number two, the general question of, is there a mesorah in paskening and maros? Number three, the whole question of brown, the color brown in maros. And then number four, things that are a bit beyond brown, pink and other shades that belong to the red family. And we'll discover that, in fact, there's actually a huge controversy that erupted on this topic about 10 years ago in Eretz Yisrael. Some people went to war against the shittas that are mekel to an extreme and argue that they're just being essentially mater dam nida. And ever since then, it's become fairly clear and fairly well known to those following that this whole subject is far from being very clear and very straightforward. So it's hard to really attempt to encompass such a huge subject, multiple subjects. We'll try our best. But due to the nature of how huge the subject is, we're not going to be able to contain it in one shiur. So this is just a sort of haschala to a topic that will definitely take more than one shiur to cover. We'll start with two tshuvas, somewhat famous to those who look into this. Two tshuvas from the year Tafresh Lamed, year 1870, which is almost exactly 150 years ago, from two Galatianer Rabbanim. The first one is Shalas Tshuvas Beis Shleima, by Rav Shleima Drimmer of Skala, which was in Galicia. And at that time, he was considered one of the G'dolei HaPoskim Mamish. So in Shut Beis Shleima Yeridea, Beis Siman Yadalad, there's a Shaila, Skala, Yom Dalad, Vav Kislev, Tafresh Lamed. And it's addressed to Ahuvi Yedidi Harav HaMuflag, HaCharav Ubaki, Menachem Mendel. So from the next source, we're going to see that apparently the Rav he was corresponding with was known as Reb Zechariah Mendel Zilber, who was a matz and a dayan in Kolamaya, another place in Galicia. He was under, that time, the famous Rav of Kolamaya was Reb Hillel Lichtenstein, so he was a dayan in his bastin and a matz. And he asked the following shaila. So Beis Shleima says, I got your letter yesterday. So he's responding fairly immediately. And he says, I'll start with your last question. You asked, Shekama pa'amim eira b'kilos, it happened a number of times in his kehillah, that Kvei Terase was asked about a kesem, and he paskened that it's tameh. But the woman didn't want to take no for an answer. So she sent it, l'chacham shebamakim acher. Sounds like mamish out of town, somewhere else. V'tiher, she got a better answer. So E shaper avda. Is this okay? Is this, obviously one assumes that Rav Mendel Zilber wasn't so pleased about this happening, surely just by nature of it undermining his authority. But technically it's a shayla in Hilchas Nida. You're allowed to ask the question twice. So the Beis Shleima gets into the sugya. There's a sugya in Gemara Nida about a chacham shahira. The story in Gemara is that Yalta brought blood to Rav Bar Chana and he was metame. So she also didn't take no for an answer. She went and she brought it to Rav Yitzchak Berei Rav Yehuda and he was metar. The Gemara is discussing different issues involved here, and the Gemara adds a few more details. It says she told him that really Kol Yoima, every time I brought this same thing to Rabbi Bar Chana many times, and he was always metar. Right now, it seems that he has some kind of ache in his eyes, so that's probably why he was metame. So Yitzchak Berei Rav Yehuda, with that information, said, okay, I'm not really paskening against Rabbi Bar Chana, really. He also paskens this way. He just is having a bad day. So we're combining that. And then the Gemara adds, even later, part of the vart here is that Yitzchak Bar Yehuda is relying on his Gemara, on what he was taught. So there's a combination of things here. He's relying on what he was taught, and Rabbi Bar Chana is usually metar. So that's what that Gemara says. Obviously a bit more complicated than that. And this is, of course, back in the time of the Gemara. We'll get to it soon. The history of the Chamisha Dam Tmeim, the back in the time of the Gemara, they were still only asserting certain shades of red, and they were in matar other shades of red. That's many, many Gulgulim ago. And now you have this question of this Chacham said this Chacham said that, and in this case, he always was matar, plus he's relying on his what he was taught. There's also a related sugya in Chulin by Trefus, similar type of discussion. So, just to share a portion of what the Beis Shleima says, he says, Lafi Rashi says in Chulin that whenever the Hira relates to maros, relates to the color of maros, so the way Rashi is magded it, there is Zeo Hira Detalia B'Svara V'Loi B'Gemara. Rashi already says it's not something you're taught, it's just you're sort of using your own mind, your own logic to decide what color this is. And in fact, sometimes people get it wrong. People mix their colors up. So it's a svara issue. This person's svara could be better than that person's svara when trying to evaluate a matter. So according to that, when it comes to nida, and the whole issue here, the whole story related, seemingly, seems clear from the Gemara, we're talking about an actual question relating to the shade of blood. So Rashi would be magda that as a hira misvara. That's what Rashi wrote on Chulin. So that's how Rashi would understand the Gemara nida. So Yabazai, based on our understanding of the sugya, another chacham can't just come and be matter from his svara. Only if you have your own tradition. Then that could be a factor in being made a leheter after the first Rav was Eiser. But Lefi Rashi, that in Maris it's just svara, so l'chayr that would mean that it would not be Rashi leheter. The Gemara says, even in Nida, that he's relying on what he was taught. So you have to say lav dafka. But even though it's a hira misvara, but because specifically in this case, so yes, he saw that it's tar, and he believed what she said. And he was willing to believe what she said now. That Rabbi Bar Chana usually is matar. We wouldn't necessarily accept her edus either. The combination of factors here. He sees that it's tar, misvara. And she says that Rabbi Bar Chana is always matar. So he's willing to believe her. So with his re'iyah, plus believing her, so then he was willing to be matar, then it's allowed to be matar. That's Shitas Rashi. According to Tosfos and Nida, it seems to disagree with Rashi. It seems they hold that if you're makubal made aboisov, technically, safe, your Rabbeim teach you which color is which. So it seems like Tosfos would taka be magdir that it's actually considered a gather of Gemara, not a gather of Svara. Okay, that's a bit of the discussion in the Gemara. But then we get to the main point. The Beis Shleima says that this is all theoretical. All these discussions, Chacham Shahira, that's dafka b'yameim. But bismaneinu zeh, l'shayach loymar b'inyan hamaris, that you're relying on what you were taught. De'ein lanu ela divrei hashulchan aruch, de'ein letaher rak mara lavan v'yareik she'ein l'sapkom ba'admumis klal. Today all we have is the Shulchan Aruch. What does the Shulchan Aruch say? And we'll get into it a bit more later. We're only matahir, lavan and yarek, white and yellow, where there's no shayla b'chlal, there's not even the faintest question of there being any red in this matter. But v'kol shenoita af k'tzas l'mare admum mesorah l'shachar, the two bad colors, red and black, if it has even the slightest hint, tameh. And then the Beis Shleima doesn't stop at that. The Beis Shleima goes on and says, ve'ein shum ish mekubo meraboy bifrat hamaris. There's no person that has some kind of tradition from his Rebbeim with regards to maris, this matter versus that matter. So Abazoi, loy shayach loymar, you can't say this word from the Gemara that you're relying on what you were taught from your Rebbeim, and that's a factor to be able to override the previous guy. I have Gemara, I was taught something. Says there is nothing. No one was taught anything. All we're doing is we're taking the Shulchan Aruch kipshutai and we're just applying it. So Bazoi, bevadei lekuli amar, Rashi Tosfos, everyone would agree. B'kahai gavrim bezman hazeh hurak hayra misvara. Right? We're contrasting Gemara versus Svara. So today, all it is a shayla of Svara. Emhamara einay naita. You just need to have, some basic brains and the ability to identify colors, and you can either there is some netiya to Adam and Shachar, or there isn't. That's a svara. So Bazai, once one chacham is matam and misvara, lefi the sugi of the Gemara kumtais that in a case of svara, another chacham is not allowed to override him with another svara. Only with Gemara, not with svara. So Bazai, the second chacham can't come and change the halacha here. Oh, very good. Istama, that's what the Mats wanted to hear. That once he's matame, no one else can be matar after him, because there's no mesorah, it's just svara. That's the logic of the Beis Shleima. Then in the continuation of the tshuva, the Beis Shleima deals with three other specific shaylas involving ksomim that Rav was dealing with, but in all three, the shayla is whether there's a tzliya or not. In one of them, she was sitting on a bench, and then she realized, there were chicken droppings on the bench. You get a lot of these types of shilas. And he says, it's a shilti gibayrim, which we mentioned in last year, about birds. But In that case, though, it was a bit more iffy. Next day, okay, we're not getting into all the pratim. But in three different shaylas where the shayla was a tzliya, can we say that it came from this, could it came from that? And in each one, he paskened what he paskened. Then we find in the shaylas of Tshuvas Divrei Chaim Halberstam of Tzanz, needs no introduction, who apparently was responding at the same time to the same Rav. We find in Shut Divrei Chaim Yeridei Chelik Beis Simon Pei, there's a tshuva addressed to Rav HaMuflag, Mendel Zilber, Amotz, and Kalamai. And then in the next tshuva, it doesn't say a name at the beginning, Simon Pei Aleph, but based on the fact that it shtims with, it all comes together, it's pretty clear that it's to the same person at the same time about the same question.
He did ask 2 people.
What?
He did ask 2 people.
He himself asked multiple people, yeah. And Divrei Chaim's tshuva came later, because his tshuva is dated Shvat, and the other one was dated the next day in Kislev. Okay, we'll see what they said, and then we'll see if there's a question. So the shaila is Isha Shala Rav Ve'ir Al Kasem B'Timela, and then she asked the Chacham Makamacher V'Tiher. Pretty much the same question. So he says tshuva, and it's dated Yud Zayin Shvat, that B'emes, what's the first thing you think of? The Sugin Nida, right? Yalta, that says, Loi Shayach Hach Shak Levatariya. Why? Da'anan Ein Moiden Rak Ma She'enei Doime Klal Lo'edem. Again, similar point, same point. We only paskin on things that are completely not like red. And he goes further. V'lochin Gam Noshim Pikchais Royes Dam Bizman Hazeh V'chein B'chol Zman. He says, that's why a woman with some experience can also tell you whether it's Tamar or Tar. It's not that complicated. The Kamavor b'Shulchan Aruch, Siman Kuf Tzadik Vav, Siv Zayin v'Achreinim. What does it say there in Siman Kuf Tzadik Vav? It's talking about B'dikas. And the question is, what about a blind woman? So it says, Hasuma b'dekas atzma, umara lachaverta. She does a b'dika, and she shows her friend. So Divrei Chaim takes from there that the friend is mamish telling her whether it's Tamar or Tar. So, but he goes further. He says, "V'nkein ein bazeh hayra klal." He goes even much further. He said, "There's no hayra here. It's not paskening. There's no paskening of any kind taking place here. You're literally just asking a basic question: what color is this?" You can ask anybody what color this is, as long as you are, working with the assumption that they know what colors are. And if there's some kind of question, some kind of disagreement. So let's go ask a bunch of people, and surely there's wisdom in masses. At some point, you'll get a sense whether it's red or not. So you have these two paiskim. In one sense, they're saying the same thing, that we only are matar anything that has no similarity to red. And in the first mark of the Beishlema, he says clear like Shulchan Aruch, only love and v'yarik. Divrei Chaim seems to go even further. According to the Beis Shlema said it's considered a hayra misvara and not migamara. So therefore, the second one is not allowed to be matar. According to Divrei Chaim, he's saying there is no hayra here, there is no paskening. Women could be just as involved as Rabbanim here. And there shouldn't be any. Your question is, what do you do when one Rav says this, one Rav says that? That shouldn't be happening. And if it is happening, we have some kind of problem, so then we have to go and ask as many people as we can until we resolve this problem. But it's not about this Rav said this and this Rav said that. Then the Divrei Chaim adds another point to try to explain how's the taka possible, if it's never supposed to be an argument. So how did it happen that one Rav said this, one Rav said that? He says, My Zayda, the Chacham Tzvi, I believe on all the matzeves from, at least I know specifically in Bobiv, Eneklach of the Divrei Chaim, they're all makbid, they write on the matzeva, Nached, Chacham Tzvi, they're very proud of this yichus. So the Chacham Tzvi, Zayda the Chacham Tzvi, says, has a yisoid, that when we have a shot, when the color changes, we follow what the color looked like to begin with. Right when it emerged, you'd see a Saddam L'chutz. The context there is that even if it gets redder later, when we first saw it, it was kosher. So we say that it must have been the air, some kind of external reaction caused the color to change. That's what the Chacham Tzvi said when it starts off whiter and then it gets redder. So Divrei Chaim says, If it started off redder and then it whitened, which in other words he's implying is probably what must have happened here. Why did the first Rav say this? And the second one must have been redder when the first Rav saw it. And then by the time it got sent somewhere else, maybe it was a day or two later, or certainly hours later, it must have been whiter. So what will we say based on the Yesod of the Chacham Tzvi? We have to say l'chumra, that something external must have whitened it. The Shvas Yaakov disagrees with the Chacham Tzvi on being mekel when it gets redder. He says when it gets redder, you're machmer. But surely the Shvas Yaakov will agree l'chumra, that if it started off red and then it got whiter, we do follow how it started off. He says, it seems the Sidrei Tara also agrees with the Chacham Tzvi. So Bazoi, Lemaisa, we should follow the first Rav's psak, and she needs Zayin Ekim Utvila. And then he discusses it a bit more, and then he ends off, now we can explain where both Chacham here are coming from. Right? We don't want, we don't want to assume there's some kind of argument over the Metzias. That explains everything. Just like in Chesha Mishpat, it says in Simon Chavtes that when you have two Eidim who are completely contradicting each other, we try to answer and explain how it's somehow possible that that they're somehow agreeing. You just have to reinterpret a little bit what happened. So ultimately, he also ended up Fi's first answer. There's no first Rav, there's no second Rav, but then the his theory as to what happened, he also ended up paskening to follow the first Rav's psak, Latame, because it was probably redder when he saw it. So, again, to sum up, both are clearly denying the existence of any kind of mesorah, and paskening maros. It also seems fairly clear that they only viewed Lavan as a mara tahar and not brown, and l'chayra haba hatalia, because once you start being matir brown, that's when there's a lot more room for confusion, disagreement, mesorahs, etc. But if you take that out of the picture, why would you need a mesorah? It should be pretty simple. But of course, these discussions these tshuvas are not just touching on that, they're also touching on other questions. L'mashal Divrei Chaim gets into the sugya of a marash and ishtana, which also has to do, by the way, with the discussion and controversy today, when things that are red turn brown. There's also the sugya b'chlal of chacham shahira, or this machlekes between them, about is there a din hayra or not, and is it something that is the territory of Chachamim, or is it the territory of Nashim? There are other Achreinim that say clearly it's not Loi Nimsel Nashim, it was Nimsel Chachamim. Should also point out the Chassam Sefer we quoted in the last year. Isha achas matza kasem v'herasol l'chamoisa v'amra shutame shuv herasol l'marshas. So she showed it to one woman and to another woman. So you're getting the sense that women are taking a look, women are deciding. On the other hand, I believe I saw someone, the Tshuva of Chassam Sefer quoted where he is referring to a Chacham who was asked about a Kesem. So if I had to sum up, it would seem that as recently as 150 years ago, there was no known mesorahs relating to maros. It also seems that they were generally not mekel in the color brown, which is its own discussion which we're going to get into. And at least in some of the places it was anganum and it was accepted that women could also just use their own common sense and see whether it's reddish or not. So it would seem that very rarely indeed that they brought a bedika or a kasem or whatever to a Rav where the question was taka, what color is this? Which is, as we described earlier, what's extremely common today. It's still, of course, possible that it happened sometimes, especially if there was a case of a woman who was having difficulty being matar, etc. And on the other hand, back in the olden days, from these descriptions of these tshuvas we're seeing, it seems like they were getting stained right and left by all kinds of external stuff. And there were probably a tremendously higher number of shilas where that was the question. Like in the Beis Shleim, the other three questions were, is it from the chicken? Is it from walking through the butcher? It's still happening 150 years ago. You're still walking through a bloody market. And questions like that. Even to the extent that they may have sometimes actually brought a question where the question is, what's the color? And assuming, again, that it's not a question where maybe it changed over time, then it's a little bit more of a complicated question. But if it's just a literal basic question, what color is this, and is there any red here or not, it was probably considered a very, very, very basic shaila. So therefore it would seem justifiable to be magder, that historically, up until not that long ago, the whole mitzias of running and bringing maros colors to the Rav every month, as we have it today, probably didn't really exist, certainly not in the sense that it exists today. Now let's go on and start getting into a bit of the background of the shaila of brown, because we can't really go further without touching on that. Right? The Beis Shleima said, "Ein lanu ela divrei HaShulchan Aruch de'ein l'tayr akmar alavam v'yarek she'ein l'sapkom be'admumis klal." That's indeed what it says in Shulchan Aruch, in the beginning of Siman Kuf Peches, Kol mara adam beinim hikea harbe, whether it's light or dark, tmeim, v'chein kol mara shachar, same for black, light or dark, v'ein tahar ela mara lavan, v'chein mara yarek. And by yarek, what do we mean? Afilu kemara hashayva hazav, we mean yellow. Kol shekena yarek akarsi kasavim, certainly yarek, which is green. And then there's a hagav, v'chein mara shekayim lashon Ashkenaz bloi, b'chlal yareku, blue is also included in yarek. For the Shulchan Aruch and the Tur, the way the Tur writes it is Dvar Torah Chamisha Damim Tmeim Be'isha V'Suloi. Certain shades of red are tamei, certain shades of red are not. But Idnish and Ismait Abikiyus, now that we lost our proficiency, Chazir L'Tamis Kol Sheyesh B'Mada Adaim, and then he continues Bein Mukei Harbe, etc., etc. Look in the Beis Yosef there. So the Beis Yosef backs up, gives you a bit of the background. In Nida, it says in the Mishnah, Chamisha dam tmeim be'isha ha'adoim v'ha'shachar u'chakaren karkoim u'chememe adama u'chemazog. Adoim is just red, plain red. Shachar is black, plain black. Karen karkoim is the crocus flower, or the saffron, which is a spice that's which we derive from the crocus, are both called karkoim. So we'd have to get into what exactly it's referring to when it says that. But that's the third thing. Me'emi Adama is waters of the earth, mixing earth with water. Ukemazog is diluted wine, as there used to be mezig wine with water in those days. Bisham I add another two shades, Af Kameme Tilsa, Uchameme Basar Tsali, water in which the Tilson plant was soaked, fenugreek, or whatever the plant is, and Meme Basar Tsali is water, liquid from roast meat. Mesil Matar, then Yarek, Akav Malal Matame, Chacham Matar. Ezu Adoim, when we say plain red, what do we mean? The Gemara says, Kedam Hamaka. What do we mean when we say Shachar? Kecheres, with a Saf. Amek Mikan, Tame, Dea Mikan Tahar. That was the original psak, that if it was less red, less dark, then it's also Tahar. It's magdu each thing, where the Adama is from in the Meme Adama, where the wine is from in the Mazuk. Then the Gemara gets into a discussion, where do we know this idea that some blood is Tamei and some blood is Tar? Uses psukim to prove it. And it says there are essentially four. From the drasha we see there are four. There's a fifth one. The fifth one is Shachar. Shachar Adam Hu Ela Shalaka. We say it's really red, it's not its own shade, it's just red that lost its coloring. So what we see from the sugya is just as today, when we speak about colors, we have a very highly developed sense of the range of colors. So the same was true then. They were able to define, there are four different shades of what they called red. Then when it comes to the machlekes, Besham Besil, maybe Tilson, maybe Basar Tzali, it's not fully clear from the sugya whether the maskana is to be Matar and Gansen. So we have another two shades here that we're not sure about. So the Beis Yosef says, the Rosh says, halachic Beis, the Ran says, it also seems like that from the Rambam. The Rambam just wrote, hey, dam, tameim, bavad. Then Beis Yosef adds, mi'u edna le'nafkalon midi b'hai safik. We don't care about this whole question. The kol mara odim tamei k'meishes bar b'samuch. Then he quotes the Torah. Beis Yosef quotes the Torah, edna shenismait ha'bekiyas. So he says, you already see in the Gemara. The Gemara says, there were a number of chacham that said, I don't pasken maros. I'm not chopping the difference in the shades. And then you have the Rishonim. The Rishonim quotes the Rosh. The Rosh says, "B'deiras halalu ein baki liris b'damim lishoyin hachmasay ulehafri ben dam ledam afil b'meichach me'atam and oyin menachacham shoyinim noim liris damim kol shekeina idna she'ein l'tayr shum dam hadayim lamaris admumis." So this is where you see the psak, as we knew it for many hundreds of years, the Rosh is saying we're not matar anything that has any shade of red whatsoever, unless it's lavan v'yorik kamare hazav, and that's what kumtais from the Rambam, that's what kumtais from the Rashba. The Gemara, of course, itself says that lavan and yorik are tahirim, so that much we know. Then the B'Shesef asks, no, but if we pass on like Bishil, that these shades of Meimei Tilson and Meimei Basar Tzali are tar, why are we not matar Bizman Hazeh, like Lavan B'Yarik? There's two things in the Gemara that are tar. I guess seemingly Basar Tzali should be one of the easiest ones to be able to figure out what that looks like. It says, Yesh Leimar, since there's a shade of red there, Ve'enon U'Bekiyam Memaris, Metalmin Lu V'Lei Metarinon, only Lavan B'Yarik where there's no Netil Admumis Klal. Akavia was Matar Yarek. What was the issue there? He was referring to yellow. He must have held that it was Neitel Admumis, but Chacham said, we hold that it's not Neitel Admumis. Okay, but Meimei Tilson and Meimei Basar Tzali, everyone is made that they're Neitel Admumis. Afal Pikein Chacham were Matar, but we're not Baki, so therefore, Le Matarina. And again he says, he concludes, Amashmaduhu Adin, the Kol Maris, wherever there is some shade of red, then it's always Aser. If there's no Shaila Bechlal, that there's no hint of red, then it could be Matar. So it seems that right in the time of the Amayroim, and certainly in later times, it seems like they lost the ability to distinguish between various shades of red, and they reverted to what you would call a more primitive grasp of colors. And even in the time of Chazal, we see that the word Yarek includes yellow and green and blue, and it's all called Yarek. So that indicates that there was a general, more, you could say, primitive, general sense about colors in general. And even Adim over here, the word Adim is including a wide range of shades. Elamai, Chachamim cared so much about these halachas, they were able to use random examples from life. Oh, this looks like Karkaim, this looks like Meimei Adama, in order to be able to distinguish. But it seems like that was an aberration. That generally people did not have such a good distinction in colors. And then they saw that they were losing track, it was getting too confusing, and they just canceled the whole thing, the Kol HaDeiros. One more minute or two. Now, when it comes to brown, no mention clearly of brown in any Gemara, at least not clearly. Torah, Shulchan Aruch, for sure not. So it seems that brown also did not exist as its own separate color. So one would assume that was probably included in the discussions of Adaim, that really brown was included in Adaim. It was considered another shade of red. And that's before we get to people nowadays in the last 20 years who have actually attempted to test the things in the Mishnah to try to demonstrate that maybe some of the things in the Mishnah are essentially brown and not red. And certainly if you had the category of Neitel Admimus versus Yarek V'Lavan, surely one assumes that most would think that brown belongs to the Adim category. But in the last 200-300 years, we see that a discussion suddenly arises. The first one in the modern day discussion, although it turns out there was someone before him, is the Yaakov Emden, the Shelas Yavitz. He asks in Shelas Yavitz, Chelik Alf Simon Daled, Mara Dom Anreitel Etzeva Broin, which is like Klipas Haramoinim, the shells of chestnuts, Ukamashka Hakavil, like coffee. He says, doesn't say in Shulchan Aruch where it belongs, Nidali lahakal boy. He says, surely it's better than Basar Tzali. Basar Tzali has some redness, and they're still matar. We're not matar, it's a big chumrah, because we might confuse it with other shades. But at least there's some netiyah la'odim in Basar Tzali. Mash'enkin Brian, in the opinion of Rabbi Yaakov Emden, has no redness. If anything, it's a pale black. That's his opinion about brown. And Ebazai, he has his whole mahalach to explain why Ebazai, a super pale black, or something that's reminiscent of pale black, should not be a problem. However, and we'll have to get to it in the next installment, if you look as late as the Darkei Tshuva, who's Mesakim all the Achreinim, you'll see that most Achreinim, up until, you could say, the Holocaust, it seems, were more likely to say that brown is Tameh, certainly for Bedikas, for Hefsek Tara and Zayin Akim. There were far more who asered than were Matahir. So this is the haskala on the topic. Like I said, in next year we'll discuss the further development of the discussion of brown till our generation, the mesorah of what we call the mesorah, the big controversy that we mentioned that erupted in the last 10 years against this mesorah, or at least parts of the mesorah, and b'chlal, those who want to argue that lefi the Makairis themselves, brown should be included in Adam.